Hi, my name's Kevin Hicks. Welcome to the History Squad. Now, the Wars of the Roses didn't start because one man wanted the crown of England. It started because of a bankrupt, divided kingdom left with a king who could not rule, and too many powerful men who thought they should. In this film, we're going to go back to the beginning, not just looking at the rival claims to the throne, but actually what turned a political crisis into a civil war. So the Wars of the Roses officially began in May 1455 with the First Battle of St. Albans. I've made a model. Now, we're going to go further back. In fact, we're going to go back to the man I hold responsible for causing the whole thing. He probably didn't realise at the time that he was going to cause this terrible 30-year civil war, the War of the Roses. That's Edward III, King Edward III, favourite of mine. You see, he had 13 children, 9 of who actually survived into adulthood, and 2 of them particularly, John of Gaunt, his third son. He actually gave rise to the House of Lancaster, which eventually becomes the House of Tudor. And then you have Edmund Langley, his 4th son. He gives rise to the House of York. So there you have the Yorkists, the Lancastrians. But when you look at the Lancastrian king, Henry IV, father of Henry V, that great king, well, he wasn't supposed to be the king. Henry IV usurped the Plantagenet king, gosh, this is so confusing, Richard II, who apparently starved to death in Pontefract Castle. So the line has broken. And then you've got problems in the future because others will accuse of, well, you weren't supposed to be the king, were you? Then you have Henry V. Wow, what a king, what a powerful king. Defeats the French at Agincourt. But these guys left England with a massive, massive problem. English France. How is England going to pay for it? How is England going to keep hold of it? And that's where it falls apart, because England will lose its lands in France, and it will cause some serious division, because the king who lost it was really a sickly boy, Henry VI. Henry VI, son of Henry V, that great king, was crowned King of England 1422. The problem was he was only 9 months old, and a child can't reign, of course. So he has a regent, and that was John, Duke of Bedford, the brother of Henry V and the king's uncle. Unfortunately, though, he died in 1435. Now, the king still had good advisors. He was only 13 when Bedford died, and still in his minority. He had 2 uncles who governed via a council. You had Humphrey, Duke of Gloucester, and then his half-uncle, Cardinal Henry Beaufort. And just a little aside here, they reckon it was the cardinal who was responsible for Henry VI being so pious. In English France, you had Richard, Duke of York. He was appointed the king's lieutenant commander of English France, replacing the Duke of Bedford and taking charge of the failing English efforts of the final stages of the 100 Years' War. So the king gains his majority in 1437, just before his 16th birthday. Now, this lad was extremely pious, spends a tremendous amount of time on his knees praying. He was also frail, a little bit sickly. He was gentle, devout and well-meaning, but his style of kingship was the problem. Medieval kingship required more than goodness. A king had to reward, punish, command and dominate the powerful men. Henry VI couldn't do that. And once great nobles stopped fearing the crown, the whole system began to fall apart. But as the King of England, and also the King of France, due to the Treaty of Troyes from his father, he needs a wife. And in steps Margaret of Anjou. They were married in 1445. However, to secure the marriage, there was the secret, note that, the secret Treaty of Tours was signed. Had to be secret, because it would have never been ratified. It would never have got through. You see, as part of the treaty, England had to surrender the vital territory of Maine and abandon its claim on Anjou. When this was made public, it sparked an outrage. and the French, who'd been watching. They wasted no time. Now the path was open and they attacked Normandy, which was lost in no time. The knock-on effect to all of this was that returning soldiers from France, those English bowmen and those Welsh bowmen, they were unpaid and they were furious. But think about it from their point of view. They'd fought in campaigns and battles, maybe their fathers, even their grandfathers before them. All of it for nothing. The lands in France were lost. Then add to that the English settlers and noblemen dispossessed of their land in France, their farms, their manor houses. Now they returned to England with nothing. The king's popularity and his authority was deeply weakened. And then it triggers the Cade Rebellion. And Cade Rebellion matters because it showed that this wasn't just a quarrel between dukes. By 1450, anger at corruption, taxation, defeat in France, as well as bad government had spilled into open revolt. England was already unstable before York and Somerset finally came to blows. So what happens next? It's the summer of 1453. On receiving terrible news of the English defeats in France, the king collapses into some form of stupor. He's unresponsive, unable to speak, can't even recognise his newborn son, Edward. This breakdown lasts 17 months. Many modern-day professionals suggested that he suffered with catatonic schizophrenia. Others suggest that his mental problems stem from his maternal great-grandfather, King Charles VI of France, known as Charles the Mad. Regardless of the causes, the king's political absence leaves a void, a power vacuum. The kingdom still needs to be ruled, justice administered, and decisions made. And that role was filled by the Duke of York, who was made protector and defender of the realm. Richard, Duke of York, incidentally, had a strong claim to the throne of England, as his great-grandfather was none other than Edward III, but through both his father's line and his mother's line too. Upon becoming the protector of the realm, Richard, Duke of York, has his arch-rival Edmund Beaufort, 2nd Duke of Somerset, who, by the way, is the chief favourite of the court and a staunch ally of Queen Margaret. He's arrested for treason for his part in the loss of Normandy. He's imprisoned in the Tower. But after a year, 1454, the king regains his senses. He had York dismissed out of hand, Somerset released from the Tower, and completely reinstated. Now, while all this is going on, noble families throughout the country have their own feuds going on. Some of these are actually erupting into violence. And you've got to remember that these noblemen had their own retinues of armed men, bowmen, men-at-arms, all that kind of stuff. The most famous feud is actually the Percy Neville feud. Now, the Percy family were led by Henry Percy, 2nd Earl of Northumberland. He was a staunch Lancastrian. That means he was for the king. Now, the Neville family were led by Richard Neville, 5th Earl of Salisbury, but alongside him was his eldest son, also Richard Neville, Earl of Warwick, who became known as Warwick the Kingmaker. A staunch supporter of Richard, Duke of York, they were Yorkists. Now, the Percy Neville feud was over land and a particular wedding or marriage. It was so vicious that it erupted into violence when the Percys attacked the Nevilles returning from a wedding. Now, reading about all of this, I discovered that the subjects of these noble lords were fiercely loyal to their noblemen. If you farmed Percy land, you were a Percy's man. Now, I do know that the Percy land and Neville land sometimes abutted, and the local farmers or land tenants themselves would often have a fight. But what you've got from all of this is two clear factions are emerging. The Lancastrians for the king and the Yorkists for the Duke of York. This will result in the first battle in the War of the Roses, the First Battle of St. Albans. And this is important because at St. Albans, the Duke of York was not yet openly fighting to take the crown. He declared that his aim was to remove the king's bad advisers, especially the Duke of Somerset. But once armed men are used to settle a political dispute, the rules will change, and what began as a struggle over government will now become civil war. Well, I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, like, share and subscribe. And if you'd like to support the channel further, why not have a look at joining our Patreon community? The link is in the description. Now, this is the first of a series of films that we're doing all about the Wars of the Roses. So stay tuned. I'll be making some models, that's for sure. Now, before I go, quick shout out to some of our Patreon members, John Poletsky, Karen Deere, and Wayne Miller. Hey guys, thanks a million. Bye for now.